Welcome back to Family Twist. Before we jump in, here's a quick recommendation. If you haven't listened to our episodes with Chris Martin yet, go cue those up first. Those episodes are 157 and 158, Two Families, One Primal Wound, and Addiction, Absence, and the Road Back to My Birth Father. Chris's story as an adoptee sets the stage beautifully for what you're about to hear. Today, we get the flip side. His adopted mom, Mary. She's open, funny, and incredibly generous in sharing her perspective on the adoption journey, the ins and outs of open adoption, and the bond that's grown between them. If Chris gave us the adoptee's lens, Mary's story is the perfect companion piece, candid and full of those little moments that remind you why family stories matter. Okay, let's get talking to Mary. Kendall and I were so excited we didn't even introduce her, we just jumped right in.
I was surprised when we first started doing this podcast about how much animosity there is toward adoptive parents. And I never knew that was part of the equation.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I was surprised hearing that also. It's just it's a very complicated thing when you didn't have choices with your birth and were disconnected from your biological family, may not know anything about beyond your age and what the laws were and all that. And what if your adoptive parents weren't a match for you, emotionally, psychologically, whatever your needs are? Although they can't make a comparison that kids raised by their biological family sometimes don't feel like a match. But there's just an added sore there where it seems like some are resentful of the life that they have.
yeah, for sure.
That's a sad experience to have.
Yeah. And I mean, mine, like Chris's, it
Mm.
sounds like we were so positive that it was hard for me to get my head around that at the beginning. And also just having known some friends who were also adopted as babies,
Mhm.
as I was, their experiences were fantastic as well. So I just never had seen the other side of
Right.
the story. So
Right.
it was hard for me to relate to. So,
Yeah. But getting your perspective is important because obviously he doesn't remember being born, being a baby and stuff. And so,
He hears the stories, but really what I wanted to share is how we got to our open adoption, because we planned on letters and pictures, and that's as far as we ever had gone. We did not have this plan of A, B, C, D, here's how we're going to do it, really just transformed into that.
there's no roadmap for that for sure.
No. And I had read books and, I'm a retired school counselor. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology. So of course I went to the place of learning about what adopted kids need and the material that was out there, 27 years ago when I started reading and when Chris was little. I can't remember what I had read. That was so long ago to say, oh, I read this and that stuck with me. But I do know I had some books once our open adoption became open and we started down that road. I started reading books about open adoption and just kind of seeing what else was out there, what that looked like.
mhm.
And I think the term for ours is cooperative adoption.
So I imagine that this memory is still vivid in your mind. Can you kind of take us back to the evening that your husband came home for work and had this interesting news and question to ask you?
I always laugh at that because we spent $25,000 trying to do in vitro, and a girlfriend was going to be the gestational carrier for us. And that didn't happen, unfortunately. It didn't work. And Tony's, taught seniors in high school at the time, and Chris's birth mother was in his class. And hearing the story of our infertility journey. And so he came home in April and said, oh, by the way, I found a baby and it's for free. Since we had already flushed 25,000.
Yeah.
And that's how it began. I'm not going to use birth mom and birth dad's names because I did not ask permission from, I'm sure they would be completely fine. I don't want to assume that. So I'm going to be more impersonal and just say birth mom and birth dad.
Sure.
So birth mom had come to him and was very emotional and crying and asked, "Are you and your wife still interested in a baby?" And he's like, "Well, probably, we kind of took a break from it all." And she says, "Well, I'm pregnant and I wondered if you would like to adopt my baby."
Kendall and I have such respect for educators, but I can only imagine what kind of guy your husband is that a student would feel open enough to go and just even have that conversation. Like,
Right. And, instantly he went to the principal and said, "Oh my gosh, you need to know this has happened." And we did not discuss it or have contact until the summer, once she had graduated, and Tony made that really clear. We have to wait until you're no longer a student. And so the birth parents came out to the house and we met them. Birth mom had already made up her mind. She had already decided this was how it was going to be. And I encouraged both of them, you may want to interview other adoptive parents.
Yeah.
Get all your options. As much as I love this idea, I felt protective of them also, that you need to do your research and look at many options before making a decision on that. And they weren't interested in that. And we just started getting to know them. Came out to the house, dinner. Chris was born in December, so she was just a few months pregnant at that time, probably 3 months. And they started the childbirth classes, and I attended all the childbirth classes. And luckily, birth mom and birth dad, we all have very dark humor. We found humor in things that, people would go, "That's dark," to laugh at that. So, I'm attending the childbirth classes and everybody, it's their first kid, and you go around, you introduce, and we get to birth parents and birth mom says, "Hi, my name," birth dad's name. "And this is Mary. She's going to be adopting our child,"
Yeah.
crickets. That's fine. And in the room, So I did the whole process with them. When we had the baby shower, I asked her, "Would you like to attend? Would you like to meet the family that's going to be raising your son?" And she said, yes. We did all the hard things together. Many people were very uncomfortable with that. It wasn't about them. We wore matching shirts and I had a balloon put in so we both looked pregnant. And so she came and met everybody, which I'm sure for her was extremely overwhelming. We were at the birth with Chris. Imagine that. And I always say we didn't have front row seats. We stood behind her. I got to cut the cord, but that shows you the maturity that she had for 18 years old. She came with me when I was picking out for the bedroom and we shopped together. We bonded and did everything together. When Chris was born, I call it the happy family and the sad family. We have not met their parents. And as you can imagine, and initially they wanted, if you're going to give your baby away, we won't raise the baby. This was their first grandchild. They're the oldest of 4 children. So this was their first. And so parents and her birth mother's brothers and sister, 2 brothers and sister were there. Birth dad was there. Birth mom's best friend was there. Me and Tony were there. My sister, my sister-in-law, my best friend was there that tried to have the baby for us. So, for a first birth, it takes quite a while. And we're all in the waiting period together, getting to know each other.
Wow.
And of course, at first it's awkward. But as the day passed, and I think right away, the magic happened. It was just the right families, the right personalities. And we shared this experience. After the baby was born, the nurse brought Chris over to the ring next door, and all of us went up to this room after he was cleaned up, and we're all in there together, passing him around, and it was really a beautiful thing. My mother-in-law said to birth grandma, here's your grandson. And she says, well, I'm not the grandmother. And of course you're the grandmother. This is before we even started talking about an open adoption. Birth mom, all she knew is she didn't want to see Chris, that it would be too hard for her, and that we would do letters and pictures. That's when he was born. That's all we had discussed. And so it was just very magical from the beginning. Even the old nurse, when she heard it was adoption, yeah, she's all, I'm sure she's had negative experiences. As the day went on and she got to see everybody, she got excited. Chris was born on December 19th. Next day we came to pick him up, and birth mom had decided that she would meet him.
No.
Somebody had said to her, you can't say goodbye if you've not said hello. And so we got there, and birth mom and birth dad and Chris were all together. And of course, my heart stopped a little bit. I had always prepared myself that she could change her mind. I told her, if you need to change your mind, I don't know how you're going to do this. This is the hardest thing you will ever do in your life, but you have to change your mind before we take you home. And you have every right to change your mind. Of course, the thought, if she had, would have just devastated. But I felt that she needed to be sure,
Mm-hmm.
voice. And so we all spent time together with Chris, 4 of us, put him in an outfit that birth mom and I picked out, let them say their goodbyes. We went outside the room. And like I said, we always did the hard stuff. It would have been so easy to send the nurse and they'll still get him for us, but we didn't do that. We went back. We said our goodbyes. Of course, birth parents were crying. It was very emotional. I said, I love you. You're my angels. And we left. What a baby. We're looking back. Sweet. And so a week passed without any contact. And every day I just thought, what is she thinking? What does she need to know? The loss, the grief that she's experiencing, because I have all the joy. I got all the good stuff. And so on Christmas Eve, I drove to her parents' home, and I said to her, I had pictures of him, and I said to her, I've been doing a lot of thinking, and can you give me a reason why you not be in Chris's life? Because he's going to turn in and want to find you anyway. So why don't we just cut to the chase? Never have that happen. And you just are a part of Chris's life, and he always knows. And so she said, I have to think about it. And she got back to me and said, yes, and I'll come. Her birthday is January 13th. So 3 weeks later, she says, I'll come on my birthday. And she came with her dad, and that was the beginning. Then her parents started visiting us. Then her siblings came with her parents. And then in the summer, we had our first birth family day where adopted families there and birth families there. And and so, 3 generations showed up.
Amazing.
Birth dad's family was a little bit late for me because birth dad, it was just harder. So
It's amazing. What I know about my adoptive parents is that they would have been open to an open adoption, but that was not in the cards for
Right.
my situation. I really think that my adoptive mom would have approached the situation just as you have. I wish she had had that same experience, because as I got older, well, she only lived until I was 10, but as I was getting older, she would say things like, I wish I knew your birth parents, and, those kinds of things that made me know that they were so supportive of my search.
There are no words to give thanks to the birth parents for that gift.
That's what my mom used to say too.
Whatever the circumstances were that they had to make that decision, it's not a decision any birth mom would ever want to have to make. You're making that decision for the life of your child that you feel for the life of your child, it would be best if somebody else raised them because of the circumstances, the age. To come to that understanding in your heart is so much. It's a sacrifice that you're making for the love of your child.
Mary, can you talk a little bit about the very unique way that you told Chris the story of his birth? And thank you for sharing that with us too.
You got it.
Thank you. That was very helpful and very touching.
So I don't know how I came up with that idea. Created a story for Chris when he was 2 years old. And I took pictures and made it with 8.5 by 11 computer paper. And I just typed up a story and titled it God's Special Plan and explained it in very simple terms that a 2-year-old would understand about how mommy and daddy wanted a baby, but mommy's tummy was broken and mommy couldn't have a baby. Birth mom came to daddy one day and said she was too young to have a baby. And would mommy and daddy like, I have pictures of everybody in the family. And here's who birth mom and dad and their family, adoptive family, and everybody in the family. And this create one big family for you. And we read that all the time. He would initiate, I want to read my story.
That's wonderful.
Until he was 5, that he understood the story.
Yeah.
I just wanted it to be normalized for him. That he had one big family that loved him. And that would just always know that. But at age 5, just one day out of the blue, came running to me. So he's been thinking about this. Mommy, your tummy wasn't broken. It was the box. And I go, I'll show you. And he goes and gets the book and shows me where the picture that I used of myself and Tony. Christmas time, our first Christmas, and I'm holding a box and the box torn. Yeah, a gift came in this box and it was torn a bit. He goes, Mom, see, it's box that's broken. It wasn't your I came from you. And I still get emotional. This was very difficult. It broke my heart for him to know that to really understand that he did not come from me because I loved him so much that I could not have loved him any more than if he had.
Yep.
No, mommy's tummy was broken. Or you didn't come from mom's tummy.
Oh,
I know, and I wish you came from my tummy, but it's okay.
Yeah, sure.
You didn't come from mommy's tummy because I love you as much as I could love you if you came from mommy's tummy. And he was crying and we hugged and I said, just bless that you have mommy and daddy and you have your birth parents and you have so many people who love you. And we had that moment and off we went. Never brought it up again.
yeah. I had a similar experience with my mom too, when I was old enough to understand that she hadn't given birth to me, right? And my parents just normalized everything. It was just matter of fact and positive, and we don't really know the circumstances of your birth, but it doesn't matter. We love you. They couldn't have handled it better. The joke about my adoptive mom is everybody says that she thought that I hung the moon. They were both super, super, super attentive parents, and they'd been trying for 17 years
Yes.
to have a child. So they were very excited to get one.
Well, you were the love of their life. Just like Chris, he's just such a good human being.
Mary, I'm just curious where you land on the nature and nurture side of things. And we don't say nature versus nurture because we feel like it's both. I never got to meet Kendall's adoptive parents, obviously, but she's told me so much and we talk about them all the time that I feel like I know them. I know his birth side of the family, but we've always thought thought the nature and nurture thing was a very interesting dynamic.
Oh, it is. My bachelor's degree is in sociology. And then
Yeah.
my master's in counseling psychology, which would have a lot more genetics. And so that's what I always teased. Oh, Chris is my little experiment. We'll see which one it is. And you cannot love genetics out of a child. The genetic component and some of the Chris is inherited with ADD and anxiety. That was just there, and that's genetic. Chris's mannerisms, his expressions are 100% birth dad. I have when birth dad, unbeknownst to us, was using drugs and became addicted to drugs. He spent a lot of time in and out of jail for drug-related stuff. He's been sober now for 11 years, so, wonderful, happy ending, but there was many years that it was not a good situation. So I've seen birth dad when he's angry and the look he gets on his face, expressions, and Chris was probably like 16, 17, 18 months old. He sitting on the bottom of our stairs and he got mad at me about something and he looked at me and I was the exact same look. So see, these things aren't learned. This is all genetic. With the nurture part of it, he shares our humor, although both sides of his birth family have great senses of humor too. We're intellectual people. Chris is an intellectual. He presented his master's research. We went and watched him. It's interesting to see how much his teaching style is like my husband's. And he has observed my husband teaching, just the way my husband explains things and does things as a parent. He's in it for galley. To watch Chris up there and see Tony and Chris, I'm like, wow, okay, there's a learned behavior and way of expressing himself. So he's a wonderful mix. And I get to go, that's birth dad. Oh, that's birth mom.
Yeah, that's been one of the fascinating things for me from the outside looking in, just getting to see Kendall would be a totally different person, I think, had he been raised by his birth family. But just to watch him interact with his birth father and siblings and just seeing like the similarities and a little bit of the short temper. And it's just, I'm just like, I'm amazed. Like I'm thinking about a moment where his birth father spent the weekend with us and them holding hands and just like the way they look. He's just like, wow. Yeah.
Chris is an adult now. Oh my gosh, his laugh is totally birth dad's.
Oh, wow.
And I'll hear him laugh, or he's on the phone and I'll hear him laugh when he's at the house. And I just chuckle. Yeah. Okay, there's birth dad is with us.
Yeah. Chris was very open about his feelings, his challenged feelings about his birth father. One of my favorite parts of the episode was Chris talking about his younger half brother and just like the similarities there. Can you kind of just talk a little bit about that experience?
It's a freak show. I'm telling you, both boys got dad's genetics because Chris's younger brother is proof of that. So Chris has a brother that's 2 years younger than him from birth mom. And then there's a little span of time. She got married and then had 2 more children. Dad just has the one son, and we met him when he was 2 years old. He came out to the house, and other than him having dark hair, Chris had very blonde hair as a child on birth mom's side of the family. They were the exact same child. The shyness. It took Chris forever when he was little to get used to new people, and he'd have his head buried and just the whole thing, his expressions, everything about it. I was like instantly in love with this little boy I had never met because it was so much like Chris.
Wow.
Tony and I are just looking at each other going, holy cow. And birth dad was, as the day went on, I knew how to draw him out and make him interact with everything I had to do with Chris, I did with him. And so birth dad was talking to now he's married to her, saying, oh my gosh, Mary knows exactly what to do with him. I'm telling you guys, I already raised this child.
Wow. It's amazing. I
Yeah.
just love finding those similarities.
Chris was a super, super picky eater, just very challenging. His younger brother is just like that. Last weekend, we had birth mom, birth dad, their spouses, and all the siblings over together. And so later, birth dad's wife, the next day, is texting me at night. I had to text somebody who gets it. We're in a restaurant. He's eating shrimp. He's trying this. I'm like, I get it, so that's just the kind of relationship we have. And I do want to say something about birth mom's husband and birth dad's wife. Wow. What amazing people that they have accepted Chris with open arms as one of theirs. That's why this open adoption works. Everybody does it because this was what was best for Chris. It was about this child, and they both married spouses that adore him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we really appreciate you sharing all these details because we want everyone's perspective and stories out there. While there is obviously controversy about adoption and there are a lot of strong opinions from all sides, it's important that we keep this a safe space, an open space for everybody to share their story. Our opinion might be a little bit different than some of our guests, but that's okay. It's really important to have these stories out there.
There's not a name for the relationship, but birth mom's mom is my husband's age, Tony's age. She just turned 70, and my husband will be 70 in January, and I'm 3 years younger. So we're the same generation. Birth mom's mom and I are like sisters. We call each other once a week. We keep in touch.
That's amazing.
We're like a family. And I say, not a name for our relationship. There hasn't been one developed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So our open adoption is like when people get married. You become a family when two families merge, when people get married, and our adoption did that.
And Chris was very open, talking about the primal wound, and it's going to be a lifelong thing, just like it is for, I think, every adoptee, even though his life has been amazing. We really appreciate that he shared that as well, because, not everything can be tied up neat like a bow.
No, it's such a interesting concept. And of course, with an open adoption issues aren't on the radar the same way when you don't know the family, you don't know the story. No, this was just always a part of Chris's life. But on a side note, I had been listening to podcasts and things about trauma and the resetting of the nervous system and therapies that people do. And adoption had been spoken about. And I remember thinking, very interesting, especially with anxiety. And so when Chris was sharing with been going to a counselor for about a year, when was sharing with me, yeah, Mom, my counselor thinks my social anxiety is connected to trying to find a sense of belonging. And then when I said, well, honey, there's a lot of information out there about the trauma of being separated from your birth mom. That you had a loss there, even though you don't remember, your body remembers it and your mind remembers it. You knew her heartbeat, you knew the sounds of her voice, all around her. And when you came home with Dad and I, there was some sort of a trauma. But when I said that to him, look on his face, it's like I was able to put into words a feeling that he always had. It was just like, oh my gosh, that's it. And then he said, well, I feel bad because I don't want you to think that I don't love Dad and that I don't love the life I had and all that. It's not competing. You have that experience and you have that loss of grief. that doesn't have anything to do with the feelings of me and dad, but you have that loss.
I feel like I learned a lot of things about myself retrospectively. One thing that I used to joke about with my adoptive parents is that I was such an extrovert as a child. And as I got older, I equated being an extrovert with having strength. And it was really, I think now about myself that it was a facade. I was trying to normalize myself, like I'm just as good as everybody else, even though I was adopted. I think that's what was really happening. And my mother would tell me things like, every child, if they get separated from their parent when they're in a store, is going to freak out a little bit. But if I got separated from my parents, the freak out level was
Okay.
over the top.
Right.
And I've always thought about that as an adult. I wonder why, because they never abandoned me. You know what I mean? They were never the source of that abandonment issue, but I always wonder, why was I reacting the way that I was reacting? And sometimes hearing these theories makes me really think about that.
Right. I did say to Chris that I think the primal wound with his anxiety isn't 100% from that. I guess because we see birth family anxiety, younger brother has some of the same manifestations that are exactly like yours. So genetics plays a role here, but Chris has been very, very sensitive, intuitive person. He's just a sensitive being, and he's also very highly intelligent. He, is mentally gifted in some areas of the way he functions. And so I said, this definitely played a role in some of your way your anxiety manifests, and maybe at a very young age put you in a flight or fight sort of situation that your nervous system did not recover from. And because you're so intelligent, even as a little infant, you might have been processing things a little differently. When I worked as a school counselor, the really intelligent that always had the most anxiety. I said, the kids that aren't so smart might have it better in life because they're not analyzing everything all the time. Chris just, at 5 years old was already analyzing how it could not be that, no, I came from his tummy. So I just said, I think there's a lot that played into your anxiety, and the primal wound is one of them.
Yep, I agree with that. I was always recognized as exactly the same way, sensitive, intelligent, but also I was a master manipulator. I think they kind of went hand in hand, like I could work the room, as I felt like I needed to. But it is interesting to recognize those things about yourself as you get older,
Kendall and I jokingly argue about, who's the more intelligent of the two. But I definitely have the higher anxiety.
Harder of the two, huh?
See?
Oh my goodness.
As the mom that got to raise Chris, it always breaks my heart that he has struggled with this sense of belonging and not feeling like he fits in. And I'm just so happy for him that he has words for it now of what it's been and how much lighter he is now. Just being able to process and talk about and acknowledge, wow, this is a real thing, has just, I'm not going to say it's not there anymore. That's too powerful, but that not dwelling on this feeling that he had that he couldn't identify.
Mm.
Like it
Yeah.
freed it for him.
Yeah.
Be just so much lighter. People in your
course.
audience might be listening. So many women now have infertility, and somebody might be in the process of, considering adoption, that not to be afraid to do an open adoption. And every step along the way, it's about the child, what's in the best interest of the child, and for his or her psychological well-being. And it touches your heart to have an open adoption, explore it.
Yeah, I so wish it had been an option for my parents. I know they would have fully embraced it. And I just think about how fortunate you have made Chris, because he has both of those sides of the family and was raised that way. It took me 47 years. Today is actually the day of my discovery. So August 23rd, 2017. So 8 years ago was when I discovered my half brother who'd been looking for me.
Wow. Happy anniversary.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, your story, Chris's story, I think would make a remarkable book, especially oral history style, which is something that I've experimented with, just because there are so many characters to this story. I think it would be fascinating to hear everybody's perspective from, going back to the pregnancy all the way to today. I think would just be really fascinating. At the very least, a movie. I think there's a movie there.
I know. Birth mom's mom always says, you need to write a book. You need to write books. Oh, yeah.
It's amazing.
I might be reaching out, Mary.
And who knows? We'll see. Maybe birth mom will want to come on the show.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah. Mention it to her and,
Yeah, no pressure.
Oh, she's very open.
That's so cool.
Well, thank you again. We just adored talking to Chris, and he's just such a sweet young man. And, it's been a pleasure and an honor getting to know y'all.
Well, thank you for what you're doing with the podcast. It's great.
Thank you.
Wonderful service. Connecting.
Thank you so much. All right. Big thanks to Mary for pulling back the curtain and letting us see adoption through her eyes. She brings such warmth and wisdom, both as a mom and as a counselor, and it adds another layer to what Chris shared in his earlier episodes. You put the two together and you get a portrait of open adoption that's honest, sometimes messy, but ultimately grounded in love. And if you haven't heard Chris's side yet, go do that, because when you hear them side by side, it's going to hit you a little different. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next week on Family Twist. Oh, but don't forget, family secrets, they're the ultimate plot twist. The Family Twist podcast is presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications and produced by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC.